The opening of the Sonata in E major, opus 109, establishes a mood of serenity never before heard in the sonatas. It is a hymn, but one elevated above all churchly associations. Its chordal foundation is as solid and rich as a Lutheran chorale, but it flows in a way that no chorale ever did, for Beethoven has clothed it with a delicate play of intervals shadowing its strong outlines. Here is the basic tune. And here are the intervals arising from its chord structure, shadowing it. The delicately syncopated anticipations of the basic structural tune breathe a kind of airy life into the hymn-like march of its harmonies. The stemmed notes must stand out in relief against this winged intervallic play in order to realize the intriguing ambivalence of Beethoven's pianistic inspiration. At the top of the phrase, where we expect to resolve upward to B, a prophetic voice interrupts the flow, pulling us suddenly out of the orbit of B major by sinking a semitone from A sharp. It is a serious and moving declamation with a solidity of texture quite unlike the opening. It is couched in a kind of mirror image counterpoint. Just as the phrase is about to close, it wells up again, but dissolves in a flow of arpeggios traversing the whole keyboard. These stand in for the melody and counterpoint preceding, with this difference. The tonal horizon suddenly shifts and sinks to D sharp major instead of the expected C sharp. But then we almost as quickly slide back into B major through the back door, as it were. Such harmonic and melodic ellipsis is typical of Beethoven's late style, and they are part of its mystery, leaving the imagination to roam in faraway, unexpected regions. In a way, these passages are the incredible concentration of the composer's earlier practice of creating tonal perspectives by the expansive preparation of new dominants. When you suddenly step aside and find yourself in a totally unexpected region, the effect is surprising and ravishing. There is another example of this in the Sonata in A-flat, opus 110, in the first movement. Here Beethoven has been wonderfully lost in the key of E major and must find his way back from this region to his home key, A-flat. Here is the way it happens. The shift of horizon is totally different here in its effect. Another form of extreme concentration in this movement is seen in the great phrase comprising the development and the recapitulation. The motive has started in B major and modulated quickly to C sharp minor. Now this great phrase takes off from its dominant, G sharp minor, with a 4-bar melodic motive from the base of the preceding phrase. This becomes the basis for expansive repetitions accompanied by the fluttering sixteenths from the opening. There is total unity of motive and continuous 2-in-a-bar harmonic rhythm. The tension achieved in this magnificent unbroken phrase is aroused not by unexpected shifts of rhythm, but by a steady and dynamically increasing expansion of the texture, the bass moving downward against the long line of enchained motivic fragments rising in the right hand. The sforzandi on the weak beats would have had no place in the gentle opening, but here they are like giant wing beats sustaining the energy for soaring upward flight until the highest note is reached. When that has been reached, the harmony poises on the dominant, increasing its energy with Beethoven's old wind-up technique until the line descends with the bursting in of the recapitulation. To compare this long phrase and how its tension is achieved with the long phrases in the Opus 10 Sonata is to study a profound difference between a line which is guided by dynamic energy and dramatic intent and one which is driven by sheer emotional exaltation. The amazing spaces which are opened up as the bass descends and the treble rises are full of the suggestion of enormous power and breadth, but of a totally different kind. Notice how differently the horizon shift of which I spoke functions when it takes a new and more surprising route. The analogue of that first amazing and prophetic interruption of the melodic flow is found in the coda, where the melodic line breaks suddenly, dropping to a syncopated chordal passage, quiet, even, and somehow assuaged. This, I feel, is the philosophical answer to the prophetic interrupting statement of the beginning. After this, the fluttering figuration settles calmly on an E pedal and ascends at the end into celestial regions. What else could be the goal of such winged thoughts? If the first movement is angelic, the prestissimo following is demonic, and that must not be confused with diabolical. The surging quanta of energy darting forth are all the more explosive for their having been momentarily held in check by a long note. There is something goaded about this, something fearfully anxious, yet there is powerful restraint as well. At the moment when the tightly checked theme seems about to escape its bonds, swirling upward in the dominant, it is immediately forced back. The only moment of quiet in the piece follows, and it is the development of this terse sonata form, a section where formerly Beethoven's music usually reached its greatest peak of excitement. In this passage, the bass of the main theme becomes a canon between two upper voices over a quiet yet somehow restless pedal. The canon eventually turns into 3 and then 4 voices. Next, having inverted itself, it turns into Beethoven's favorite textural device in the late style, the mirror image. Thus quieted, the motion slows and stops. The passage sighs itself out, exhausted. The return to E minor is unexpected from F sharp, another of Beethoven's elliptical dramatic strokes. The demonic force bursts in again, fortissimo, and the movement storms its way to the close. Wonderful is the forceful rhythmic alteration in the treble of the originally smooth bass line. As if the demon had had its way and need no longer be heeded, the finale dwells in a heaven of peace and radiance, far from any hint of anything other than beautiful, even in its most energetic moments. One cannot exaggerate the spiritual transformation which is signified by this music. There is no hint of shadow in the entire piece, yet the variety is astonishing. Beethoven's increasing interest in the variation form in the late works undoubtedly was the result of his strenuous lifelong search for ultimate musical unity. He must have found his greatest satisfaction in the form. Certainly the variations found in the last sonatas and quartets are among the most touching compositions Beethoven wrote. For him, the variation form became a kind of meditation on perfection itself. One can hardly think of anything more radiantly beautiful than the theme of this set of variations, or of that of the Opus 111 sonata. Their richness and wholeness are in themselves a complete musical experience. From this initial perfection, Beethoven concentrates his whole power of textural invention, the most phenomenal the world has ever seen, and draws from it those features, however small, which may be expanded into an individual character piece while retaining the inimitable family profile. Variation 1 selects the dropping fifth at the peak of the opening phrase. As a point of departure. It is expanded to an octave in the second strain. The accompanying harmony is radically simplified so that the declaiming solo voice above may have full sway. If there is even the slightest tendency for the variation to sound like a slow waltz, the performer should rethink his approach. Variation 2 transforms the rich chorale-like theme into a pure linear flow of melodic intervals extracted from the harmony of the theme. Only the cadence bars take on choral complexity. The delicate transparency of the first half of this double variation must not be clouded by pedal. The repeat, another variant, certainly needs pedal to sustain its rich harmony. The wonderful suspensions formed by the dropping thirds, piled one on the other, must be fully revealed. It is one of the most remarkable of all the transformations. Variation 3 is like a two-part invention. It is in double counterpoint based on the dropping thirds of the theme. In the bass, they are filled in. And in the treble, they are inverted, rising spikily to the A sharp. Which is like a typical Beethovenian good-humored poke in the ribs. This variation is full of ups and downs and sudden changes of dynamics. It is fast, but the performer should be reminded that breathless speed is not synonymous with true liveliness. Beethoven's indication is vivace, and he knows that it is not the same as presto. A sense for wit, the energy of spirit, is more to the point in playing this variation. It merges into variation 4 with scarcely any perceptible cessation of motion. The slightest slackening is sufficient to heighten the impression that we rather skid to a halt in order to reverse our direction, for that is precisely what happens if you look at the graceful falling figure as a decoration in retrograde of the first 4 notes of variation 4. Beethoven has effected a shift of mood in the twinkling of an eye, from bristling energy and wit to one of utter tenderness and grace. Piacevole carries a world of implications for its expression. This variation is a trellis woven with garlands of that initial figure. Its framework is formed from the long second beat of the theme and its decorated resolution. The sensitive performer can make of this variation a choreography of such lyrical grace that the listener will wonder in awe how he arrived at such a state of elevation from the frank muscularity of variation 4. The end of this variation contains a masterstroke. Having risen in a mirror image arpeggio between the hands to a high B, it drops a minor third to G sharp, a resolution, and yet a state of suspension. Now the real thematic dropping third bursts out in the bass register to begin variation 5. This is no mere contrapuntal discourse. It is a spiritual brandishing of swords. The monotropo of the prescription is important in realizing the rugged determination, energy, and spirit of this flaming variation. It seems to say with Blake, "Bring me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows of desire." Special attention should be given to the sforzandi in the bass of the last 12 bars. So strong is their command. The bass of the last bar has a strong resemblance to the graceful sextolet of Variation 4. Is this accidental, one wonders, or is it Beethoven's subtle hint of the shifting mood to come? In the final variation, one which is sublime to the point of defying comment, Beethoven reverts to the ancient practice of doubling the rhythmical values at each repetition of a phrase, adding more texture as well, but for a purpose undreamt by those earlier composers who used it, that is, to achieve a speed that is beyond speed, a speed which becomes in the trill a vibration so intense that it holds us aloft for moments of incalculable elevation. By the time we reach this maximum speed, which is no speed, it has become clear why it had to begin with bare bones. The pageant of the unfolding and glorious return to the original simplicity is the climax of the entire work, a summing up of the momentum of the cyclic process itself, which has been gathering to this point. A careful look at the sequence of variations will convince us that no random heaping of variation upon a variation could have achieved this climactic power. The performer should note that once the pedal trill has leapt from its subterranean rumble to a brilliant vibration 4 octaves above, with the theme for the first time hesitating behind the beat, the rushing left-hand figure outlines powerful descending thirds. This is the final apotheosis of that first gentle descent in the theme. Do not minimize the importance of this powerful passage. Incredible elevation has held us far beyond the earth for only a short time, and yet Beethoven's only extension beyond the length of the theme is the addition of 4 bars of penultimate dominant harmony replacing the 2 beats of the theme. Yet how wonderful as this slows the wheeling cycle of harmonies and lowers us quietly into the cradle of the theme. It is curious how deeply and how happily lulling is that return, beyond even the warmth and serenity of its first appearance. One may ask, why did Beethoven not put a final period to such an enormous experience with an authentic cadence, instead of suspending us with tender question on the major third? A comparison of these final bars with those of the E major fugue from Book 2 of the Well-Tempered Clavier by Bach might have something to say to us about the difference between the closed security of faith and the open-endedness of vision.